Please be seated. Good afternoon. Welcome to Unity Church Unitarian, to those in our sanctuary and those joining us online. I'm the Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair. I serve as Unity Church's senior minister. Welcome to this time and this place where sorrow and joy, memory and hope weave together in remembrance of Joan Velásquez, whose presence in this life brought spirit and sustenance to so many. Today, we join in the ancient tradition of celebrating a well-lived life with stories, song, honesty, mourning, and love. All are welcome here. May you find it a blessing. We are mindful that many faith traditions inform our journeys in this life, and we hold in gratitude the foundations of love and service that those traditions hold in common. As is our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a chalice to mark the time of our gathering as sacred time, held in the light and warmth of love and truth. The light of a human life is sacred, we say. It is sacred in its being born. It is sacred in its living. And it is sacred in its dying. In the presence of life, we say no to death. In the presence of death, we say yes to life. Our responsive reading this morning can be found in the gray hymnal in the pew in front of you. It's number 726, written by one of my predecessors here at Unity, the Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs, and chosen by Joan's family for today. I will read the Roman font if you would read the italics. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink.
I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me.
I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me.
Here is the bread of life, food for the spirit. Let all who hunger come and eat.
Here is the fruit of the vine, pressed and poured out for us. Let all who thirst now come and drink.
We come to break bread. We come to drink of the fruit of the vine. We come to make peace.
May we never praise God with our mouths while denying in our hearts or by our acts the love that is our common speech.
I come to you the sword and the love of God. I come to you in you as an instrument of thy love.
I know that I am worthy. I know that I am worthy. All are worthy. Come into the embrace and remembrance of this communion. Memorials are sacred times. This is some of the oldest work that we do as religious people, as religious communities, marking the transition between someone we love being here with us and then being without. So even when we call it a celebration of life, there's grief on these days. Someone we loved is no longer here. Joan Velásquez lived. Her life touched ours, and now she has died. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we have a way of holding these days when celebration and grief are intertwined. We tell stories. We don't dwell in these times on what happens after death. We say in this place that that's between each person and their conscience. But we do tell Joan's story. And in doing that, we remember her. It is a communion of a kind, not with bread and wine, but with shared story. And by participating in telling the story of a life, we keep the story, the message of that life, present with us. So as we begin, take a moment, center yourself in this place, this time, these people. Put your feet flat on the ground. Feel the good earth beneath you. Take a deep breath. We'll begin by sharing a moment of silence together for our own prayer, reflection, or meditation, to gather our individual thoughts and feelings, to remember the person that Joan was and how she touched our lives, and to prepare to say a final farewell. Amen.
Longing, a poem by Eduardo Mitre in English and Spanish. If only memory were a city and not a statue, if absence a letter and not a back, if tonight were that morning and Amsterdam Cochabamba, if this room were that street and this shadow those trees, if this name were that face, and this lamp that glance, if that mouth were this page, and that silence these words. Si el recuerdo fuera una ciudad y no una estatua, y la ausencia una carta y no una espalda, y esta noche aquella mañana, y Amsterdam Cochabamba, y este cuarto, aquella calle, y esta sombra, aquellos árboles, y este nombre, aquella cara, y esta lámpara, aquella mirada, y aquella boca, esta página, y aquel silencio, estas palabras.
So, thank you for the honor to be up here. Thank you for being present, and thank you to those all over the country, world, who are joining us online, especialmente la familia en Bolivia. I'm so glad we have all come to remember Joan, to honor her, to channel her spirit, and celebrate a remarkable woman. As I scan the faces in this gathering, and those online, if I could see them, I see family, friends, acquaintances, and many who I do not recognize. But we all share one thing in common: our respect and love for Joan. It is not easy to quantify or put into words the incredible life she had, one filled with more challenges than anyone should face in a lifetime. And I cannot do her justice in my attempt to honor her in a few minutes. What I can tell you is that she was the most caring person I have ever known, who faced all her challenges with optimism, tenacity, determination to overcome whatever was in front of her. As a 10-year-old, when battling the aftermath of polio, she got 1 hour of freedom every day from her bed restriction due to a corrective surgery she had. But she did not let that get her down, but instead, she would plan for 23 hours to make sure she achieved everything, every goal, and to not waste a second of that free hour. In many ways, this really encapsulates a lot of Joan as she continued to face and overcome challenges to achieve a life full of extraordinary experiences, like being a Peace Corps volunteer in Bolivia, which is, of course, what led her to meet her wonderful husband, Segundo, and his family, to be a professional in the helping field, and eventually a second career with the creation of Mano a Mano. And she used every moment of every hour to plan, enjoy, and accomplish so much. On a personal level, my story with Joan started in Bolivia when I was only a child. And eventually I came to live with Joan and Segundo at the age of 13. She and I were a team, and she became the most significant person in my life. In fact, much of who I am is because of her. Her gifts of love, compassion, and humility that have been a cornerstone of my life. For the 50-plus years, I had the honor of having her as my mom. It is interesting to note that for someone who did not have any biological children, I am sure many of you will agree that Joan was a mother to many, many along her journey. But I was the lucky one because I was her child and she was my mom. I hope that I have honored her when I see her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, as I believe that Joan could see and feel her legacy in them. Thank you, Joan and Segundo, for giving me a life that was full of wonderment with my wife, Amy, my children, grandchildren, and professionally, as I too became a clinical social worker. Joan, your extraordinary journey has come to an end, but rest assured that your ability to plan for that 1 hour has benefited hundreds of thousands of people and will continue to be used and felt by generations to come all around the world. It is time for you to rest, Joni, amongst those that have preceded you. And I know that Mom and Dad are beside you. You will be missed by all who knew you and all who benefited from you. I will miss you dearly. Thank you for being my mom.
Remembrance. Wandering in the Open, a poem by Segundo Velasquez. A child wanders in the open city, no place to call home, no place to lie down, not a friend to call family, no one to mentor this poor soul. And one day, a friend reached out, took me by the hand, and guided me to hope and dream. Oh, if I could let my mind wander and allow my soul to run, I could reach a beyond I have never known, looking for a home. But first, I have to be touched by your love and be called Lazarus. I was hopeless, dead, but your hand allowed me to dream and become part of you.
Each life is rich. If today is about telling Joan's story, we know that all of us have just a piece of that story. In our coming together, we are trying to understand Joan's life in all of its fullness, in the broadest way that we can paint. And so Unity Church has a tradition of offering what we call a collage of voices, a collection of memories shared by many who knew Joan, which, taken together, illuminate the fullness of her life. And so we begin with a remembrance.
From Rick McCormick and Joan Clarkson. Joan could look frail until she smiled at you, and then the positivity and power of her personality beamed through to you. She made us feel welcome at every meeting, always adding positive energy to the discussion, inspiring us to try to work as hard as she did for change in the world.
From Ann Mabbitt. Joan and Segundo Velasquez have had a bigger influence on the last third of my life than anyone. Joan knew how to treat people and interact with them, to bring out the best from them and make people feel important. As Charles Screef once said to me, everyone thinks Joan and Segundo are their best friends. I'm certainly among that group of everyone.
From Lyle Schulten. I am deeply saddened to hear of Joan's passing. We were double cousins and had polio at the same time. Joan was a remarkable person. One memory I have was that Joan and our cousin Judy had their parents convinced that they believed in Santa Claus well into their teen years. The other cousins were jealous because they received additional presents.
From Jorge Roman in Bolivia. Nuestra condolencia a toda la familia de Mano a Mano.
From Hannah Kajeldenberg. I worked at Beaver's Pond when Joan was publishing her book, Gaining Ground. I've worked in publishing for 12 years, and Joan was one of the kindest and most inspiring authors I have ever worked with. She said she hoped her book would remind readers that people of modest means and intense commitment can make a difference, and that she did.
From Mary Picard. I always felt that Joan should be training our congressional and bureaucratic leaders on how to do good international development. As a social worker and an educator, she knew people. She was loving and welcoming, and at the same time, she knew when to set boundaries and hold people accountable. I will always think of Joan as wise, thoughtful, caring, determined, tenacious, honest, kind, and generous of spirit. She wanted to make this world a better place, and she did.
From Nate Natterud Hubinger. Over nearly 2 decades working with Mano Mano, it was a rare week for me to not have a meeting or 2 or 3 with Joan. Even though the work itself has often been complicated and challenging, working with Joan was always easy.
From Andrea Bond and Charles Screef. Joan loved music. The music at Unity, Foot Sunday, Border Crossing, the annual Sound of Music sing-along at the Riverside Theater, Guthrie musicals. Segundo was less passionate about the music, but dedicated to pushing Joan in her wheelchair from their condo through the Skyway and tunnel to reach the Ordway. They both laughed and cried at the Minnesota Opera's recent production of the Mariachi Opera, a tale of physical and cultural displacement. In high school, Joan, a Swanson, sang with 2 girlfriends, a Nelson and a Larson, only in Minnesota. They called their trio the Three Sons. For a holiday party at the Mano a Mano Community Outreach Ministry team, some of us wrote and performed a Mano a Mano version of the song My Favorite Things. For a long time afterwards, Joan joked about wanting to produce Mano a Mano, the musical.
From Phil Ostergren. Doug and I so enjoyed getting to know Joan and Segundo, working at Mano a Mano and traveling together on several adventures. Joan and I discovered we both had grown up eating Hormel spam, family dinners. So we had fun having special gourmet spam meals when we were together. Wonderful memories. We talked about going to Austin to visit the Spam Museum, but never got there.
From Ellen Green. Joan was one of those people who, if you were having a conversation with her, she heard you as if you were the only one in the world. Once you listened to her, of course, she had you, and you would do anything to help. She was the smartest and kindest woman I ever hoped to meet, my inspiration and my friend.
From Carmen Paredes Dacri. I miss Joan's phone calls, especially the ones that started with, "Now how do I save this on Google Drive again?" And always ended with, "Wait, is that the same as Dropbox?" Those little moments brought so much laughter and light. Joan was always there with gentle, loving words when I needed them the most. And her listening ear never tired of my stories, complaints, or worries. She was a constant presence, kind, wise, and wonderful human. I miss her deeply. Every single day.
From Robin Modi. When I talked with Joan, I felt like she listened with her whole self, and I was the only person who mattered to her. Her eyes would sparkle, and I felt her love and generous spirit lifting me up.
From Charles Screef, an illustration of the dauntless Joan. She was a Peace Corps volunteer in Cochabamba when she secured an audience with the Archbishop to ask for church support for a child care center. At the conclusion of the audience, the Archbishop offered his hand. Joan, coming from a liberal Swedish tradition, took it and shook it, never supposing she was to have to bow and kiss his ring.
From Gary Mabbitt. Joan was unabashed about being frugal. She hated waste. If you were ever at a picnic with Joan, you knew she was going to take home her disposable plastic drinking cup to wash and reuse it. Good stewardship was part of her upbringing. She told the story of her mother being honored for her fundraising achievements by the March of Dimes at a lavish dinner at the St. Paul Hotel. Her mother was furious with the organization for wasting so much money on celebrating. That experience impressed Joan and set the style for mano a mano celebrations. Not fancy, but tasteful. Usually in the parking lot of the Mano a Mano headquarters, with 1 or 2 food trucks serving dinner. She wanted people to know that donations were not spent frivolously.
From Jim Arbuckle. If anyone complimented her on her accomplishments, she would say, "Oh, we never expected anything like this. We thought we were just going to send a few suitcases full of medical supplies to Jose in Bolivia."
K.P. Hong wrote, "Joan made clear that accompaniment is a radical dare to live in proximity to suffering and poverty. The prophetic courage to enter places of fear and trouble and reveal a dignity and joy in the forgotten places of the world." Joan left no room for confusion or equivocation about this. That her neighbor is not someone she happened to encounter along her path, but rather those in whose path she placed herself. Those whom she approached and actively sought in a mutual pursuit of justice, liberation, and enduring friendship. For all of us on that path, Joan will forever remain an unwavering presence of accompaniment.
And my reflection, there are many things I miss about not having Joan around us anymore. The one thing that keeps coming up for me was Joan's sense of adventure, her desire never to let her health stop her from doing something. I suppose that started young for her as she searched for the doctor that would give her the survivor of childhood polio the okay bill of health to join the Peace Corps and arrive in an unexpected place in Bolivia at over 8,400 feet of altitude. But in the 20-plus years I knew her, that sense of adventure and need to live life fully never died. Whether it was choosing to travel again at a moment's notice to her happy place in Hawaii, when travel for her had gotten much more difficult, or attending a concert, play, or outdoor event whenever she could, she never stopped saying, "I can, let's do it." I will always remember my surprise and her giggling with joy as Segunda would let go of her wheelchair on a hill and she would go suddenly freewheeling ahead of us. May I always strive to have that sense of joy and love of adventure in my life till the end.
And I wrote this. I remember her delicate feet in ballet slippers on the stirrups of her motorized wheelchair. The earrings she always wore, small, dangly earrings with amethyst and citrine-colored Bolivianite chips. The tick, 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 and hiss of her oxygen concentrator. The stories she told about her time in the iron lung, her mother's devoted caretaking, and later, her clients in prisons, group homes, and asylums. Joan's commitment to those who suffer was fierce, born perhaps of her own suffering, and yet she was so joy-filled. I can still see her constant smile and hear her tender greeting. "Hello, Patricia." I remember the way she made me and everyone, I suspect, feel we were uniquely beloved.
Two more stories to illustrate Joan's life. The first is from 1967. Joan was a Peace Corps volunteer in Bolivia, a young, idealistic American whose first placement hadn't worked out and who had found herself unexpectedly and without a plan in Cochabamba. PCVs, Peace Corps volunteers, are told that in order to make a difference in their communities, they first have to understand the communities that they are assigned to. Well, the story goes that Jean got in the back of a Jeep with a bullhorn in hand and invited the community to a meeting to talk about what their needs were. The need was direct, straightforward, and desperate. After a recent tragedy, the community needed a daycare center for children. Not long after that meeting, a daycare center opened in the town. I don't know why I wrote that in passive voice. Not long after that meeting, Joan opened a daycare center in the town. Fundraising was the next question. That's the question that led Jean to the Archbishop's. Joan, my goodness. That question led Joan to the Archbishop's office. That was the meeting where she did not kneel and kiss the Archbishop's ring. So there was no funding from that source. She then went to the mayor, who said, "Señorita, you have come to the right place. In 30 days, we have a program that will be able to respond to the need." Joan was happy and went back to her center. I think the mayor, too, was happy that he had gotten her out of his office. But 30 days later, Joan was at the mayor's office and explained to the mayor that she was returning because of the funding that she had been promised in 30 days. Oh no, she was told, "You've misunderstood." Joan was livid. "No, Mr. Mayor, I do not misunderstand. You are not just a liar, you are a thief. These children are your responsibility, and I expect you to do something about it." She turned around and walked back to the center. A week later, a truck with groceries and all types of supplies stopped by the center. The second story is from 57 years later. Last spring, I visited St. Paul for the first time. I was interviewing for this job as senior minister of Unity Church, and a member of the search team picked me up from the airport. "Are you hungry?" Ray asked. "I've got this place we can get a great sandwich." Now, I figured we were going to have a meal and talk about Unity Church, and we did. But I remember two things about that hour. First, that Cecil's has the best pastrami west of the Hudson River. Second, that we didn't talk about unity as such all that much. Instead, Ray told me about how his life had been changed by Joan and Segundo Velasquez. I learned about Mano a Mano, about the work in Bolivia and St. Paul, about how for Ray and so many others, this was how their faith took form in the world, and in doing so saved lives across continents. It is the first story I heard in this city. In Greek, eulogy simply means good words. Here's what a preacher says at the end of a life to make people feel better. What are good words on a day like this? Someone you love has died. We are here remembering someone we loved who is no longer here. The words are memory of a sort. The good words are there to bring comfort to the grieving. But in the years I've been doing this, comfort seems almost impossible. There are no good words that would bring Joan back. If there were, we would be saying them. Oh, my friends, we would be saying them. So maybe the good words are a reminder of what is possible. Here is the story of a life that we know, that we can emulate. Now, nobody is perfect. All of us are flawed deeply. But a life well lived is worth remembering, worth speaking of as an example, worth living up to. Death is real, but death is not the end of a story. What we create endures. The story continues. And so if this is the end of a story today, it's not the end of the whole story. As the page turns on a new chapter, and that chapter is informed by everything that's come before it. In 1963, the year Joan graduated from college, Sergeant Shriver, the first director of the Peace Corps, gave a speech in Thailand where he laid out what he hoped this new program would mean for America and the world. He said this: in this world of the Cold War and the many little hot wars, the hydrogen bomb, the Atlantic Alliance, the Sino-Soviet split, on this giant continent where communist subversion, guerrilla warfare, and political uncertainty occupy so much of your time and thought, what room is there for a Peace Corps? What difference can it possibly make in the face of such enormous and complex forces that a few thousand Americans go overseas to serve humankind? Isn't it an illusion to think that the Peace Corps might actually help to bring peace, help to change the world? Let me start my answer with a question, he continued. What is going to change the world? If you believe that we must live together in a different way in this conflict-ridden world, how is it going to come about? Guns won't change the world. That is one of the great lessons of this bloody century. Dollar bills won't change the world, nor will simple goodwill, or even international organizations. What can change the world today is the same thing that has changed it in the past: an idea and the service of dedicated, committed individuals to that idea. What difference does it make in that bloody century or in this one? Joan's life is an answer to that challenge, that question. What difference? This difference, today. 300 infrastructure projects across Bolivia, 1,200 miles of road built. 3,000 people have received emergency air transportation through Mano a Mano. 800,000 people have access to healthcare through Mano a Mano's work. Because of this story, a family, beloveds, birth and choice, lives transformed on at least 2 continents, people in Bolivia and in Minnesota whose lives are changed profoundly because of the example Joan and Segundo have set. Because of this legacy of care, indefatigable will, and joy built in the almost 60 decades since that meeting with the mayor in Cochabamba. What can change the world today is the same thing that has changed it in the past, an idea, and the service of dedicated, committed individuals to that idea. So if that was the challenge from Sergeant Shriver 62 years ago, then Joan's life was a hell of an answer. That does not make grief easier. In some ways, it makes it worse. A big light is no longer with us. But it does give us a direction, an example to live up to. May we find ourselves worthy of that legacy. Our closing piece of music this afternoon is a tradition among Mano a Mano. The story goes, one more story, that on a pilgrimage with Unity members to Bolivia with Mano a Mano, they wanted to sing as a gift to give back. And in a brief conference about what to sing, they ended up with the Sibelius hymn that is a favorite of this congregation. And then in the moment, Segundo began to translate this song sung in English into Spanish, a song about what it means to be one people across borders. And since that first time, it has become a tradition to sing together in each new iteration. So we'll sing it today, and we will go on singing it after today. Will the choir please come forward?
canción. Oh Dios de todas las naciones. Una canción de paz. Para tierras lejanas y la mía. Esta es mi casa. El país donde mi corazón radica. Aquí están mis esperanzas, mis sueños, mi santa iglesia. Pero otros corazones en otras tierras. Laten con esperanza y sueños verdaderos tan altos como los míos. Los cielos de mi país son más azules que el océano. Y los rayos del sol brillan en hojas y el pino. Pero el sol brilla en otras tierras también. Y los cielos en todo lugar son tan azules como los míos. Oh, escucha mi corazón, oh Dios de todas las naciones. Una canción de paz para su tierra.
As we move towards the end of our time together today, we'll close with words from the Unitarian diplomat and statesman Adlai Stevenson from his eulogy for Eleanor Roosevelt. Even as we mourn, the sadness we share is enlivened by the faith in humanity and their future, which filled the heart of this strong and gentle woman. She imparted this faith not only to those who shared the privilege of knowing her and working by her side, but to countless men, women, and children in every part of the world who loved her, even as she loved them. For she embodied the vision and the will to achieve a world in which all can walk in peace and in dignity. Joan was a tall tree, and her loss is deeply felt. And hers was a remarkable life, building beauty and care in a world that needs every bit of it. So though we extinguish this flame, we know that the spark of life still burns within each of us. And we know that the light of Joan's life still shines within our hearts. In the spirit of love, we have gathered. In the spirit of love, we depart. Gentle people, go in peace, and amen.